Okay, let's now start. Um, Last time we've taken a look about some features on Microsoft Word. This session we will be starting by introducing a new program in the Microsoft Office suite, which is Microsoft PowerPoint. Can anybody tell me what do you know about PowerPoint? What is it you used for and whatnot? Presentations. Yes, presentations. Exactly. So, what are presentations? What can you tell me? What's the use of presentations? Education. Yes, could be, but allow me to put you in the situation. Okay, so you're now third year students, and you have to present your memoirs. But uh, how many pages does your memoir or will your memoir contain? Just a rough estimate. What do you think the size of your memoir will be? Yes, that's a good estimate. Maybe 50 pages. Now, do you think in the time you have to present and explain your work, do you have time to read all of your memoir or present everything you did on your memoir? Uh, I don't think that 20 minutes is enough. Yes, the important points only. But how are the important points supposed to be presented? How are they supposed to be presented? You can't present them in your memoir like highlighting the important parts. That's not very practical. So, what you do is you prepare a presentation that summarizes your work. Okay? Yes, a summary in the form of a PowerPoint presentation. In that presentation, you don't talk about everything you did in your memoir. You would ideally you would present your memoir before the time that you have to present your work, so the teachers would have time to read thoroughly your memoir and then correct it and give you some recommendations afterward. Okay, so your presentation is just like refresher or a reminder to what your memoir is all about. But you should not, how may I say this? You should not talk about everything in your memoir. Yes, you shouldn't include everything because you do not have time. Typically, they give you, let's say, 20 minutes to a half an hour. And believe me, that time is not enough to talk about everything you mentioned in your work. Okay? So you should only speak about the main points, the contribution, if I may say so, of your work. And yes, and uh, one way of doing so is to prepare a concise PowerPoint presentation. So, what is PowerPoint? It is a Microsoft Office program. It comes with Microsoft Word, Excel, and everything. Okay. The way we open Microsoft PowerPoint is the same as Word or Excel. Let me first start by sharing my screen. Is my screen visible to you?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna proceed. Let's search up PowerPoint. Click on enter. Now we're presented with this screen, the welcome screen. Notice that we have on the left pane, we have the recent documents that we have opened or worked on. So it's a shortcut to uh, essentially let you work on your most recent slides without the need of to search for them in your computer. Now, on the left side, on the right side, excuse me, we have different templates that we could choose from to make a new PowerPoint presentation. I would advise you to choose a style rather than using a blank presentation. I would advise you against using a blank presentation because it's kind of bland and it doesn't draw attention to the work that's being presented. Okay, so you have a lot of styles to choose from. For example, the gallery style, Madison. You have other styles. For example, infographics. So you can search themes online and download them. Um, for example, let's choose this Ion boardroom. Okay, now when I click on it, it gives me different fonts used in this layout. Okay, you can switch between styles like so. Let's create the blue one. I think the blue one is better. And let's click on create to create our first style. Notice now that we have our first slide. What does it say here? Click to add a title. Right beneath it says click to add a subtitle. Okay, so here we should put the title of our work. Essentially, it is the same title you use in your memoir. Okay, and the subtitle is typically used to introduce yourselves and your supervisor. Uh, for instance, for instance, um, let's do one on CPUs. Okay, this work is presented. For instance, let's do by myself. This is the first slide, always about the title and the proprietary of the work. Okay, which will be you in your presentations. Okay, so now that we have uh, created our first slide, we should add a new slide to start talking about our work, to further elaborate on our presentation. Now we have this here in the home tab, new slide. If we click on this, excuse me, okay, if we click on this new slide, notice, okay, notice now the type of slide has changed. It doesn't require us to use a title and a subtitle format, but a title and a content format. Okay, now notice that there is a drop down menu beneath the slides button. um, we've talked about it in the last session. What do drop down menus give us? Can anybody tell me? Can anybody tell me what are drop down menus for? In Microsoft Office in general, when you find a button with a drop down menu just beneath it, it gives you more options, meaning that this button can present us with more options. If I click on a new slide, it just gives us a generic title and content slide. Okay, let's right click and delete this slide for now. Let's try now to select a different kind of style of slide. Okay, notice that we have the title slide, which is the same type as the first slide. Now we have the title and content, which you will be using more often. We have section header. We have two content, ideal for comparison. We have the comparison style, title only. You can customize the content you put here. A blank slide, content with caption, and so on. Okay, so the main type of slide that we will be using is the generic title and content slide. Now, for example, we need, after we've presented our title and presented ourselves as the proprietaries of this work, we should elaborate by introducing a table of contents of sort. Okay, so let's do plan. For example, let's call it plan. Now let's add a text. For example, excuse me, for example, let's start. Our work is entitled CPUs. Let's start by introducing what is a CPU. Let's do a definition. Now we should list, after that, for example, we should list the different types of CPUs. For example, CPU types. Now CPU companies. Okay, let's stop here. Okay, so now we have two slides. The first representing our title and ourselves. Now we have the work plan of our presentation. Okay, after that, for example, we have definition. Now let's ask a question. You should first start by asking questions. Okay, what is a CPU? A CPU, for example, and now we can answer it. C is the brains of a computer. Several all sorts of calculations. This is enough. A remark I should bring to your attention is that you shouldn't include whole paragraphs in your presentation. You should only include bullet points or let's say headers, and then you explain what they mean without needing to write everything in your slide. You risk by doing that, you risk your slide being too cluttered, and then you lose the attention of the teachers or of the students you're trying to brief on your work. Okay, so an advice is to use concise short sentences. Okay, and then you elaborate based on your understanding of your work. The slide is basically for you to be able to present your work in the most efficient way possible. Understood? If you have any trouble understanding anything, feel free to stop me at any time. Okay, so everything is clear. Okay, let's continue. Now you can do essentially the same options present in Microsoft Word and Excel are also present in Microsoft PowerPoint. For example, if we go to the Insert tab, we see now that we have the option to insert pictures, just like in Word and Excel, just like in Microsoft Word, Excel, and everything. Okay, let's try this. For example, notice that the picture now is larger than the slide itself. Now you have the option to resize it. Notice that when I hover around the picture, there are multiple points that I can hold using my mouse, and then I can resize the picture in order to save space. Of course, let's do it like this, and let's bring the picture more to the center. Okay, now I also have the ability to resize the sections dedicated to the title or the content. Notice that the picture is outside the box dedicated to the content. Okay, so let's select the picture, let's bring it up here. Now we can resize everything. For example, notice that the text, when I resized the, let's delete the picture first in order for everything to be clear for you. Now the content box can be resized as I wish it to. Okay, now this isn't very practical, just I'm letting you know that you have the possibility to do this. Okay, you can even go beyond the slide, but when you pass to the presentation mode, it won't be very pretty. Okay, so I advise you to use this carefully in order to not mess up your presentation. Okay, so now we've defined our CPU, our CPU. What is a CPU? Okay, notice that a simple sentence, and then I can elaborate further on my own, because I read the sentence, I know exactly what the sentence means, I have the details. I don't have to include the details in my presentation itself. Okay, so now let's move on to the next part, which are CPU types. um, okay, CPU types. What are the types of CPUs? Okay, the types of CPUs. Okay, we have two types of CPUs. One plus two types. Oh, we can delete this right here. Now we can go back to enumerated list. The first type of CPUs is CISC CPUs. The second is RISC CPUs. Okay. Now let's do another slide to further elaborate on this. Let's entitle it the same title as the last slide, because it's in the same ballpark. CPU types. Now we have CISC, for example. What does it mean? Complex instruction set. RISC is the opposite, which is reduced instruction set. It's just a random subject that I picked to show you how to better organize your slides. Okay, now we have these two. What's the next? It's the CPU companies. CPU companies. Okay, let's do another slide. CPU companies. Just a moment, I'm gonna search for an example for my slide that I used in my master's. Okay, just a moment, I'm gonna search for it and then I will show you the slide. Okay, Okay, so I will try to find it and then send it to you via email after we're done with everything. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. CPU companies, we have Intel, AMD, and then mobile CPU companies, for example, Qualcomm. Let's go with Qualcomm. Okay, notice that our presentation is quite bland. Now we are currently in editing mode. Okay, we can move on to presentation mode by clicking on F5. Okay, if we click on F5, now we move on to presentation mode. Can you see everything okay? Now we moved on to our full screen mode, our title, the plan, definition, CPU types, okay, CPU companies, and it's over. Okay, but it's not very presentable. Okay, one way we can make it better is by using animations. Animations, for example, help us to better organize our slide. Let me give you a demonstration. For example, now if we move on from slide to slide, it's really not that well presented. But if we use animation by going to the animations tab, now we can use animations. Let's first select what do we want to animate. For example, let's animate this plan word. Now we can select from a variety of animations. For example, there are also some complex animations. Let's stick to using these blue ones. Okay, for example, I like to use the fly in animation, split, wipe, three animations, three animation styles I like to use. You can use whichever you like. For example, let's go with fly in. Now it gives us a preview as well as a rank, or let's say an order of animations to be executed. Okay, let's now select this square. We can select a single element to be animated, for example, by selecting this green, clicking on this green arrow. We can select the content of this element, which is definition. Okay, let's use an animation for it. Let's use fly in, for example. Notice only this word is animated. Now if I go back to, for example, my slide, notice that only these two elements appear: CPU types, CPU companies. Now if I click on the arrow here, it first animates plan, and then when I click a second time, it animates the definition. Okay, that's not what I want. What I want is to animate everything. Okay, now CPU types, we animate that as well. Fly in, let's use the same type of animation. Now we click this here and click on fly in as well. Now it should work. Okay, let's go back to our first screen mode. Now notice the slide is empty because now if I use the down arrow to move on to the next element, it animates the plan, and then we have definition, CPU types, and CPU companies. It's better this way, it's better organized. Okay, one other way we can do this, for example, let's delete all these animations. Let's click the animation and then press on delete, delete, delete. I can select the entire square and then use the fly in animation, and it orders them by itself. Okay, let's try to go back now. Okay, to our first screen mode. We have our plan. We first start with the definition of what a CPU is, and then we list all the CPU types, and then finally we introduce the most relevant CPU companies. Okay, it's better because the user doesn't have a visual of your plan until you tell them what your plan is. Okay, it's better this way. Now we notice we have quite the different selection to choose from, and the animation, the start of the animation is on click. What does on click mean? When I click a button, which is usually the arrows to pass from an element to the next, on click is the type of interaction that allows the animation to be activated. Okay, when I click on the arrow, on the bottom arrow to pass from one element to the next, when I click, the animation activates. Okay, now we have other types of animations. For example, we have with previous. With previous, for example, let me show it to you so you can understand it better. Let's delete these. Okay, let's delete this, and let's now delete this. Okay, now let's animate this fly in. Okay, and let's animate this. Okay, so before I move on to another option, notice that now the plan is the first word to be animated, and then the CPU companies is the second one, which it should not be. But why this happened? Because I deleted the previous animations. Now when I add an animation, it takes it as it is after the last animation. Okay, now when I deleted the definition animation and the CPU types animation, the CPU company's animation became the second animation right after the plan animation. Okay, so any animation added after that would be chronologically would activate chronologically later than the animation present. Okay, now for example, what we can do here is to use this and is to click on the animation and click on move later. Now it's the last animation. Okay, now let's check on the third animation and let's change the type of animation to with previous. Now what it did, it just denominated both animations, the definition and CPU types, as both are the second animation. They should come up at exactly the same time. Okay, if I use this. Okay, let's try and see a preview of what that would look like. Now we have our plan. Notice that definition and CPU types came came with each other. Okay, now the third animation is still on click. That's why it didn't come up until I clicked the arrow key on the keyboard. Okay, now let's change the type of animation to after previous. Okay, let's, for example, delete everything and insert our animations. Okay, let's do a split animation this time to show you the difference between the different styles. Okay, now use a split animation. Let's change it, instead of on click or with previous, let's change it to after previous. Okay, now yes, animation. Let's do this one on click. Okay, let's do a split animation as well. Okay, now let's try and see what this would look like. We have our plan, definition, and then CPU types. If you noticed, the CPU types animation activated just after the definition animation has finished. Okay, this is the difference between with previous or after previous. Okay, now let's, for example, delete everything, control select every animation here, and then click on delete. Let's select, let's go with fly in. It gives us a preview of what that would look like. um, um, I just want to let you know you can use animation with any component of your presentation, even, for example, shapes, tables, pictures, doesn't really matter. Okay, let's draw a shape and let's insert an animation. Let's go to animations, let's do a shape animation. Okay, now it's the fifth animation. um, One other advice I should give you is that in your presentations you should use shapes and diagrams to simplify the explanation process. Okay, for example, when speaking about history or anything, you should do a generic arrow, and you should use different shapes to illustrate your points. The less you write in your presentation, the more enjoyable, the more easy to follow it becomes. Okay, now let's move on to a different part. Let's insert animations all throughout this document. Let's go with the same type of animation. You shouldn't overuse animations and styles. Okay, if, for example, I use fly in animation style for this element, I should use the same style for the next element, or else all my presentation would become jumbled, let's say. Okay, let's, for example, insert a picture. I know, example, let's go with this one. Okay, let's make it smaller now. Like this. Now let's insert an animation here. We have all our animations. Let's go with another animation. Let's go with a wipe animation like this. Let's do our other slides. We went with fly in. Let's do fly in. We can select the text and apply it to it. Okay, let's select this one and use, for example, let's use a fly in animation. Okay, a fly in animation. Okay. Okay, let's go with online pictures. Let's go with this. I clicked on online pictures. Now it would use Bing search engine to search for online pictures. If I select something like that, for example, let's go with this one. Okay, click on insert. Oh, apologize. Now we can use this picture, for example, CISC and a RISC picture. This is a RISC CPU. Okay, let me give you an example of how better organized everything is with animations. Let's go with a split animation. Okay, now let's search for a CISC CPU. Insert online pictures. Let's go with CISC CPU. Okay, let's go with this one. Okay, click on insert. Okay, this one is a large picture. Let's resize it. Let's put it here. Let's delete this. Okay, okay, let's make it even smaller still. Let's delete this here. That's better. Okay, let's use a different animation for this. Let's use a wipe animation. Notice that here we have the CISC element, CISC CPUs appears before RISC CPUs. So what I want to do is to make the picture related to the CISC CPU appear just after the CISC CPU element, and the RISC CPU picture appear just after the RISC CPU element. Now what I can do is select this animation and move it earlier. It should move earlier than the RISC CPU element. Now after it displays the CISC CPUs, it will display this picture right here. Okay, and now after it displays the RISC CPUs, it will display this picture here. Let's have a look. Let's use Shift F5. By the way, F5, if you use F5, it takes you all the way back to the start of your document. Okay, but if you use Shift plus F5, it passes to the presentation mode, but while keeping you at your current slide. Okay, for example, let's go with this. We have CPU types. What are the types of CPUs? We have two types of CPUs, RISC CPUs, and now it displays the picture related to this type of CPUs, and then it displays a second element, which is RISC CPUs, and now it displays the example about RISC CPUs. Okay, this is all of this is to better organize our presentation. Okay, now let's do the other parts. Okay, let's use fly in, same with this. Okay, let's use fly in, and then let's select the entire square, and now let's use fly in. Okay, let's go back to the start of our document. Okay, we can even use animations on our first slide. Okay, let's use split. Here we can use float in animation. Let's go and now take a look at our better organized slide, if you will, presentation. Excuse me. Okay, now we have an empty slide. Let's use the bottom arrow. Now we have our presentation is about CPUs, and don't forget to speak when you're presenting. Okay, everything is depends on your everything is dependent on your speech. Okay, so for example, you would start by first saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Our subject for this presentation is about CPUs, and then you click on the arrow, it displays the title, and then presented by myself, for example, Ramesh Mohammed Idris. And then you move to the next slide, which is now to present our plan for this presentation. Okay, first we are going to start with a definition on what a CPU is. Then we move on to list the different CPU types. Third, we are going to talk about some CPU companies, the better known CPU companies. Now, with the definition, so what is a CPU? And then you start explaining, okay? Then you give a concise definition about what a CPU is. Okay, this picture is unrelated, but we just inserted it to illustrate the animations. Okay, so now we move on to the different CPU types. What are the types of CPUs? So there are two types of CPUs. First, we have CISC CPUs. Then we have RISC CPUs. Okay, now what are CISC CPUs? CISC CPUs CISC stands for complex instruction sets, for example, and RISC CPUs stand for reduced instruction set. CPU. Now we move on to the different CPU companies. We have Intel, we have AMD, and then you give general information that you have memorized, or I don't know. You shouldn't write everything, as I told you before, on your presentation, because it would clutter it and render it essentially unusable or uninteresting. You would lose the attention of your classmates and your teachers and everything. Okay, now do you have any questions concerning this subject? Any questions? Benalia, what button are you talking about? Do you have any question? For the whole slide. For the whole slide. If you want to use animation for the whole slide, for example, let's delete every animation in this slide, okay? Let's delete everything. Okay, let's click on Control A. Control A selects everything in the slide. Okay, everything in the slide, and then we use an animation. But the problem with this, notice that it animated the first the title and the first element at the same time. What we want to do is to first animate the title and then animate the elements one by one. Okay, now you have to go back and click on move later, but I don't advise you to animate the entire slide. Okay, move later, then we click on this move later. It's a problem. Okay, now what you want to do is, let's delete the animations. Let's delete the animations now. What you want to do is select this box, this title box, and then animate it, and then select the box where you write your description or put your pictures and everything. Now select an animation. Notice that it animates them in order. Okay, you should use this instead. I think it's better than to use the animation for the entire slide. Okay, you will have time to better organize your slide as best you see, as you see fit. Okay, the pages in the slide. Can we give it an effect to move to the another slide? Yes, yes you can. Yes you can. Yes you can. Uh, we will see these transitions next time, along with hyperlinks. Okay, we will see them. I think next Tuesday at 3 p.m. like last time. Okay. Presenting the pic. I'm not sure I understand your question, Miss Kauthar. Yes, pictures. What about them? Yes, what about the pictures? Um, Picture. You mean this one? You mean this picture? The title. Okay, let's go back to the title. Yes, we're at the title. There are no pictures. I'm not sure I understand your question. Okay, the fourth slide. Okay, the fourth slide. Yes. Oh, you're talking about this one. Okay, so let's redo everything. Okay. Now, what I meant to do was to present the picture related to the CISC CPUs before the element of RISC CPUs is displayed. Okay, what I had to do was to insert animations and then move the animation related to the picture about CISC CPUs before the RISC CPUs element is displayed. Okay, notice that here we have, first we have CPU types. Excuse me. Notice that here we have CPU types, the title of this slide, and then the second element to be displayed is what are the types of CPUs. Then the sentence that we have two types of CPUs, and then we have the element CISC CPUs, And then after that, notice number 4. Now, number 5 is the picture related to the 6 CPUs. Okay? Now, the sixth element is RISC CPUs. And the seventh and last element is the picture that represents RISC CPUs. Okay? With the special picture. Okay. Is everything clear now? Now, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. If not, you're free to go. You're dismissed. Just a moment. We will be having a session on Tuesday at 3 p.m. Okay, 3 p.m. Okay. Let your classmates. Yes, in the classroom. Yes, yes, in the classroom. In the classroom. Yes. Please let your comrades know. Okay. Now, goodbye, and we meet again next week, inshallah. You're welcome. Okay. Take care.